In this video, I want to talk to you about 5 big wealth drainers that could be occurring with you right now and making you poorer and poorer and poorer with each month that goes by. So hi, my name's Liam, and over the years I've spent lots of time reading and researching and trying to understand what makes people who are rich gain more and more money, whereas the people who aren't so fortunate seem to become less and less happy and at the same time make less and less money. So I've read, I've researched, I've improved my financial literacy along the way, and it's got me to the point where I'm on a pretty impressive financial trajectory just from understanding some basic things about money which most people don't understand. But anyway, this video is all about 5 big money drainers. Some of them are unavoidable, which you'll see in just a minute, but some of them can be avoided and some of them are actually taking advantage of you by dangling bait in front of you, which I'll expand on in just a second. So number 1 is negative interest and debt. Now there are 3 big negative interest and debt type things that I can think of which are very likely to impact you and your life at some point going forward, or already have done in many cases. The first one is obviously credit card debt. You borrow money off the bank to make your purchases. Now if you don't pay that money back by the specific due date, which is agreed by you and agreed by the bank, then you start getting charged interest, and the longer you don't pay, that interest compounds and gets larger and larger and larger. And unfortunately, the longer you carry that balance, the larger the interest you're going to have to pay, which obviously will seriously impact your wealth and your finances. Next up, APR on cars. So APR is the interest rate you pay on top of your fees and all the other things that you've got going on within your car loan, and that interest goes to the person who's selling you the product. So with these first 2 things and this negative debt and reverse interest that I touched on, you're effectively baited in by the seller. And that bait, well, that effectively comes from buy the product now, or get the product now at the very least, and later on pay for the product. So for example, we all know that cars these days are absolutely super expensive. A brand new T-Roc Volkswagen, that'll set you back about £30,000, and even a smaller, more conservative car is still going to set you back about £20,000. And as the median amount of money as a salary earned in the UK is around about £35,000, you can see there's a clear imbalance, right? These products that are being offered out by these car companies are super expensive, and pretty much nobody can afford them outright. So these companies selling these products, i.e. the cars, they know that they have the leverage over you and they can bait you in with all the flash marketing and all the flash things they have going on within the cars. And unfortunately, they do that at the cost of interest, which works against you. Now, credit cards, they kind of work the same. They know they have the leverage over people who don't have the money up front. So they dangle the bait in front of people, and once people bite into it, they then start claiming that reverse interest from our side, which works against your credit and you know, and your money and everything that goes along with it. And again, I know there are exceptions. I know some people generally have to leverage that time they have to pay off that credit card balance because they can't afford it and they're struggling, which I understand and I resonate with. But these offers that companies are dishing out to us and presenting as a lifeline isn't really a lifeline at all, although it's disguised as that. It's actually something what's really going to hinder your finances and your wealth over the long term. And the third form of negative interest and debt effectively is what you have with your mortgage payments. Now again, we have the same kind of thing here. It's usually expressed as a percentage, the debt and the interest on the mortgage, but we have the same thing going on with banks knowing that these products that we want and are a necessity for us as human beings to live in are unattainable. We can't outright afford these houses in most cases, and the average person certainly can't afford a house outright. So the bank steps in, offers a lifeline, or what's disguised as a lifeline, but in actuality there's a lot of interest over the years that you'll have to pay on a mortgage on your house. Now this one is a little bit different from the first 2. We can all avoid credit card debt and we can all avoid paying ridiculous amounts of interest on a car just to try and impress other people, which we don't want to impress really, and they don't really care anyway. But with a mortgage and a house, we all need somewhere to live, right? We all need somewhere as human beings to call home. And of course you'll have all those things what come along with that, such as the memories you build and having kids and growing older and new experiences and things like that, which can all be tied into having that place of home. And as well as that, over the 20 or 30 year period or whatever we've gone for on our mortgage, after we've paid off all our mortgage bills each month and we've done any corrections to the house, when things go wrong over the years, we might still have a little bit of profit left over from the amount of money we've put in versus the amount of money it sells for. So it's technically not a terrible investment, although there are much better investments out there, and the banks are absolutely ripping us off with those mortgage payments in between. Now, number two, I want to ask you a question now. Is your money being drained away by inflation? Now, this is a serious question. I know people pass this around all the time, but fundamentally, do you really understand what this means for your cash? So to expand on that, over the last 30 years, the average rate of inflation has been at or around 2.6%. So fundamentally, that means the buying power with your money is decreasing over time. Now, this can confuse quite a few people, because you might think, well, I've still got all the money and my money's growing just in my savings account, or maybe a low interest ISA that I've got. But the thing is, everything else is getting more and more expensive alongside that. So you might have this big pile of money, but if everything's increasing, your money is becoming devalued. Now, one of the big causes of inflation is, of course, the fact that the government just keeps, printing off more money and putting more money into circulation, and that just, by its very nature, will deflate your money. So in my opinion, one of the big, important games of life, which you're not taught in school, and my parents certainly didn't teach it, maybe because they didn't know and they had that knowledge gap, or for whatever the reason was, I didn't know this until I got older and started really looking into this myself. One of the big important games of life is making sure that you're beating inflation and your money isn't becoming devalued. Now, I know it's tempting to just kind of like hoard all your money when you get paid every month from work into a savings account and just think, oh, it's there and it's growing, and each month I get more money and it slowly grows. But as I said, your money deflates as inflation increases, and you might be sort of tempted to stick your money in a cash ISA that you have, and you might be lucky and you might get about 3% on that money, which is good, and it's certainly a lot better than hoarding your money in a savings account, which gains no interest whatsoever and just deflates over time. However, you can actually take this one step further, and I do recommend that most people do take this one step further. And I recommend that most people do that by investing their money into an index fund. Now, without going into too much detail, an index fund is investing money into the stock market, and it invests into a group or a plethora of companies all listed within an index, and that index typically has a close correlation with like gross domestic product. So in other words, as products get more and more expensive and the economy continues to grow and grow and grow, the price of the index fund will increase with it, and if you're buying down here and you're selling your stocks off at a later date, you'll net the profit in between the two. Now, historically, over the last 30 years, the stock market has yielded round about 10%. And if you're gaining 10% a year on average, and that interest is compounding, so the interest you earn in year one compounds, and then that interest compounds, and so on and so on and so on, and the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger, this is the best way that you can counteract inflation and stop your money being deflated to a nasty level, if that makes sense. And if you think about it, you're effectively doing the opposite of what these credit card companies are trying to do to you, of what these car companies charging you 7% APR are trying to do to you. You're getting the interest and you're compounding that interest year on year, and your bank is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you don't know and you've never used a compound interest calculator, go and Google one right now, and it might just blow your mind what kind of power compounding interest has when it's working in your favour and you're not being ripped off by credit card debt or high interest APR car loans. Now, I should just caveat and point out that I'm not telling you to invest all your money in one individual stock like Tesla or Amazon or something like that. What I'm saying is an index fund invests in a list of companies which are all indexed together, of course, and they're typically indexed together and grouped together by performance. So you can invest in the world companies, so the best companies across the world, the companies specific to the American market or the English market or the UK market or the German market, and you can choose whatever fund that you want which invests in the best companies in that sector. And the great thing is the fund is managed for you as well. So if some company is doing really well now, drops off and falls into oblivion, that company then gets substituted out, another company gets put in, and you're hedging your bets and you're keeping yourself highly diversified. And over the long term, over the past 30 years, the stock market yield has hit about 10% on average. So it's a safe bet, if you know what I mean. You're not going to yield 75% on a crazy cryptocurrency like stock. You're just gradually compounding your money over time as the economy grows and the GDP of the world, in most cases, grows with it. And by the way, this is very much likely where your pension fund is going with your workplace pension. You invest your money each month, your company matches you or doubles you or whatever they do, and it all gets popped into a fund within the stock market. Next up, we have not having an emergency section of money at your disposal, or an emergency fund as it is. So depending on your tolerance to risk, you probably want 3 to 6 months of emergency money and buffer money effectively sitting around ready to go should something go wrong and a problem arise within your life. So a quick example, the boiler breaks and you immediately need to fork out quite a large chunk of change to get that fixed. Or maybe your car breaks down and then you need your car to get to work and you need to get that fixed quickly so you can get to work and keep making money. And you know what I mean? These problems pop up, these niggly problems that people have, we all have throughout life, they pop up, and having that emergency fund set and ready to go is very, very important. And that way you're not just relying on credit cards and potentially jumping into debt with a credit card because you don't have that money sitting around. Now next up, number 4, we have the keeping up with the Joneses effect. And this one really does infuriate me, and I find it a really annoying flaw within the way in which human psychology works. But basically what I mean by that is ego purchasing. So a quick example, let's say your next door neighbour gets a new flash car. You then feel an overwhelming tendency and obligation to try and outdo them and also get a new flash car just because they're doing it. Or perhaps you're in your 20s or your early 30s and all your friends are wearing flash designer gear, which is all branded and all that kind of stuff, and it costs loads of money, so you have to one up them and get something even better which costs more money, and all that kind of thing, which ties into human psychology. It's basically the keeping up with the Joneses effect. And fundamentally what ends up happening is you keep wasting money on things you don't need to waste money on. And I know we're all social creatures as humans, we want to fit in, we want to look cool. On a deep psychological level, we want people to look up to us and feel like we're exciting and like we're doing really well. But fundamentally, if you break it down, and this might be an eye-opener, people do not care. And I promise you this is true. People are far too transfixed on their own life and worrying about what the perception is of them from other people and how much money they've got and what's going on within their relationships to even give a damn. I promise you, I know it doesn't feel like this is how we're hardwired as human beings, but people do not care. It's kind of paradoxical when you're trying to impress people who don't care and they're trying to impress people who don't care. And fundamentally, all this flash stuff is not relevant. And by the way, tracking the amount of money that you've got each month and how much money you're able to save and invest and so on, that's really important. And I've actually developed this spreadsheet, which you can see on screen right now, which will allow you to do exactly that. If you want to get this spreadsheet, I'm going to give it away to you for free, and you can do that by clicking the link which is down below in the video description. You can plug it into Excel, you can plug it into Google Sheets if you don't have Excel, and that will allow you to track your finances each and every month and understand how much money you've got, how much money is being wasted, and how much money you're spending in specific areas that you might not necessarily have known you were spending in. So yeah, click the link down below in the video description, go and download that spreadsheet for free and start putting your money that you have each month into it and see how much profit you're making. Now number 5 is simply mindset, and to go along with that, risk tolerance. A lot of people just over time develop a negative mindset, and it's not necessarily your fault. I know it can be really frustrating in life. One thing goes wrong and you're draining money and you're not being paid what you should be paid at work, and someone's beat you to the promotion that you wanted even though they're underqualified and they can't perform as well as you can. And over the time that like compounds, as we've been touching on the compounding effect, and very often it leads people to have a negative mindset, which just isn't good. I know it's hard to break out of that spell sometimes, but having a positive mindset is super, super important. And very often that leads to risk tolerance, and the more positive you are, the more tolerance you have to risk and putting your money in places where it needs to be put, and not just hoarding your money in a savings account or putting a little bit in a cash ISA but playing it safe. It allows you to take the risks where you want to take, have a positive mindset and see the bigger picture, which again I know is easier said than done. But yeah, negative mindset impacts so many people, and I hate seeing people who've become negative over time because the system has effectively just beat you down over and over again. And having that positive mindset is really important, and that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be talking about within this YouTube channel. I want to help as many people as possible become financially literate and understand what they need to do with their money so that they can buy peace of mind and become happier just with that peace of mind and that knowledge that they have the money, they have the savings, they have that growing pot over the long term, which in my opinion will lead you to having a positive mindset, being happier in life, living a longer and healthier life, and being able to have more quality of life as well. So keep your eyes on my channel for all this content coming up. I'm really passionate about helping people, and I think I'm going to be able to do that with some of the things that I have to touch on. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you again in the near future.